She was once the most beautiful woman in all of Europe, a noble woman whose porcelain skin and youthful glow enchanted everyone who looked upon her. But behind that perfect face lurked a monster. Obsessed with staying young forever, she believed. The secret to eternal beauty was hidden in the blood of young girls. Servants whispered of screams echoing through her castle walls, of innocent peasant girls who entered and never returned. Their lifeless bodies were found pale, drained, and broken. Also, she could bathe in their blood. Was it vanity, madness, or pure evil that drove her to commit such horrors? This is the cursed tale of beauty, blood, and madness. In the late 16th century, in the heart of Hungary, a child was born into one of Europe's most powerful noble families. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory, and from the moment she opened her eyes, her life was destined for both greatness and horror. She grew up in the sprawling halls of her family's grand castle, surrounded by tapestries of gold, candlelit ballrooms, and the cold, calculating world of aristocracy. But it was not just wealth that shaped Elizabeth, it was blood. The Bathory family was notorious for cruelty. They ruled their lands with an iron fist, punishing peasants with barbaric acts that Elizabeth witnessed as a child. Some historians whisper that she was forced to watch public tortures as entertainment. Others claim she was taught dark, occult rituals by her family's closest advisors. But even if these tales are exaggerated, one thing is certain. Elizabeth grew up believing that power was maintained through fear, and human life, especially that of peasants, meant nothing. Yet, Elizabeth was not just another noblewoman. By the time she was a teenager, she was famed for her breathtaking beauty. Her pale, porcelain-like skin and sharp, commanding eyes turned heads everywhere. Suitors from powerful families sought her hand in marriage, hoping to align themselves with her wealth and influence. But at just 15, she was married off to Ferenc Nadasdy, a powerful Hungarian warlord, in a lavish ceremony that filled the halls with nobles, jewels, and promises of power. Her marriage, however, was no fairy tale. Ferenc was a soldier, often away at war, leaving Elizabeth to manage their vast estates alone. She ruled with the same cold ruthlessness she had learned as a child, punishing servants with an iron fist. Servants whispered that she had a temper unlike any other woman of her time, that when she was displeased, her eyes burned with fury, and her hands trembled with the need to hurt. But even then, Elizabeth had one obsession greater than power: her beauty. She was determined to remain young, flawless, and desirable forever. In a world where women's value often depended on their appearance, Elizabeth's beauty was not just vanity, it was her weapon, her identity, and her greatest source of power. And then, the first accident happened. One day, while a young maid was brushing her long black hair, she tugged too hard on a knot, causing Elizabeth to whip around in fury and strike her in the face. The blow was so hard that the maid's nose bled onto Elizabeth's hand. As the blood dripped onto her pale skin, Elizabeth believed, perhaps from superstition, or perhaps from sheer madness, that her skin looked instantly younger, smoother, and more radiant. Whether this was true or only a delusion, something inside Elizabeth snapped that day. A horrifying idea began to take root in her mind. Could the blood of young girls preserve her beauty forever? From that moment, the woman who had once been feared for her temper would become a monster feared for something far worse. And the killings began. The Bathory Castle, once a symbol of wealth and power, soon became a house of nightmares. Elizabeth's obsession with youth consumed her entirely. At first, she began with subtle cruelty. She lured young servant girls into her private chambers under the guise of teaching them proper etiquette. But what awaited them was torture. Witnesses later described unspeakable horrors. Girls were stripped naked, beaten until their skin broke, and then their blood was collected in basins. Elizabeth experimented with different methods, sometimes cutting the girl's skin herself, sometimes forcing other servants to do it while she watched with a twisted fascination. She would smear the blood onto her face, massage it into her arms, and later, when her madness grew, she began to bathe in entire tubs filled with the blood of her victims. The screams echoed through the cold stone halls at night, but no one dared speak. She was a noble woman, untouchable by law, and anyone who disobeyed risked becoming her next victim. Elizabeth's trusted servants became accomplices. Some helped her find young peasant girls, luring them with promises of work or food. Once inside the castle, they were never seen again. Rumors spread through the village's parents began hiding their daughters, locking them indoors, praying that the countess's men would not come knocking. But Elizabeth's hunger grew insatiable. She was no longer content with peasant girls. She wanted noble blood, believing it would be purer, stronger, and more potent for maintaining her youth. She invited the daughters of minor nobles to her castle under the pretense of teaching them courtly manners. These young girls arrived in fine dresses, smiling with dreams of learning from one of Hungary's most powerful women. Instead, they met their deaths in the darkest corners of the castle. Elizabeth's madness worsened. She reportedly designed special torture devices, iron cages where girls were hung upside down, their throats slit so the blood would drain directly into tubs. Some were burned with hot irons. Others were left to freeze to death outside in the snow. Elizabeth watched with cold detachment, sometimes laughing, sometimes shrieking in rage when she believed the blood was not fresh enough. And yet, despite the countless deaths, no one dared to stop her. She was too powerful. The local authorities feared her. The villagers whispered of her as if she were not human, calling her the Blood Countess. But even monsters eventually push their luck too far. For years, Elizabeth Bathory's reign of terror continued unchecked. Hundreds of girls disappeared, their families left with nothing but rumors and grief. But when Elizabeth began killing noble-born girls, her crimes could no longer be ignored. The deaths of peasants were one thing tragically common in feudal Europe, but when the daughters of respected families vanished, powerful voices began to demand justice. In 1610, King Matthias II of Hungary finally ordered an investigation. Count György Thurzo, a distant relative of Elizabeth, was tasked with confronting her. One freezing winter night, Thurzo and his men stormed the castle. What they found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Servants lay dead or dying in the hallways. Some girls were discovered locked in dungeons, starved and beaten, their bodies covered in deep cuts. Others were already dead, piled in corners as if discarded like trash. The smell of blood and rot filled the air, and in the center of it all stood Elizabeth herself, calm, collected, and unrepentant. When confronted, she denied nothing. According to witnesses, she simply smirked, as if the entire world were beneath her. But even her noble status could not protect her anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming, and too many powerful families demanded justice. Elizabeth's accomplices, her most loyal servants, were tried, tortured. Some had their fingers torn off with hot pincers before being burned alive, but Elizabeth herself was never formally tried. As a noble woman, it was considered improper to execute her. Instead, she was sentenced to life imprisonment in her own castle. Her punishment was chillingly symbolic. She was bricked up inside a small chamber, with only tiny holes for food and air. No mirrors, no beauty treatments, no blood baths, just darkness and silence. For 4 long years, Elizabeth rotted in that stone prison, stripped of everything she had ever valued. In 1614, guards found her lying face down on the floor. She was dead at 54 years old, her once beautiful face now withered and pale not with youth, but with age and decay. When the news spread, the peasants celebrated. For them, the monster was finally gone. But legends of Elizabeth Bathory never truly died. Some still whisper that her ghost haunts the ruins of her castle, searching for young girls to drain of life, forever trapped in her obsession with beauty. Call to ACIO in history remembers Elizabeth Bathory as one of the most terrifying women who ever lived. A noble woman whose vanity turned into madness and whose thirst for eternal youth drowned entire generations in blood. What do you think? Was Elizabeth driven purely by madness, or was she a victim of the cruel world of power and beauty she was born into? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and if you love dark tales like this, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because we have even more shocking stories from history coming your way.